By the way, historical revisionists like to bang on, some of you in the back will say, well, I've heard about this, sort of, didn't we have dark ages? Didn't we have dark ages in Europe? Well, these periods where, it was Muslim scholars kind of keeping the fire burning of intellectual inquiry, of academic discourse. Well, no. This golden age of Islam is largely an invention. When the Arab world was a sort of center of learning and scholarship, it was only really a brief moment in history, and only because they were translating Greek and Roman texts. They had a brief period of advance, but only because they conquered a lot of the world's leading libraries, and only because all of the people who were making the great discoveries, who were Jews, Nestorians, Byzantines, Hindus, Copts, and other non-Muslims, had to work in Arabic so they didn't get their heads chopped off. So the idea that we have this great intellectual debt to the Islamic world is nonsense. Andrew Bolt on Sky News, whose show I like to do because they get the lighting just right, has a really good example recently, perfectly encapsulates Islam's integration problem in the West. He recalled the case of Dr. Ibrahim Abu Muhammad, the Grand Mufti of Australia, who gave a speech to explain to Australians they're wrong to think that Muslims can't integrate into culture. Absolutely wrong. Of course we can. Now he's been living in Australia for 13 years. He gave a long speech about how it's perfectly reasonable, to worry about. No, Muslims integrate fine. But he gave this speech in Arabic. He's been living in Australia for 13 years. And his idea of integration is giving a speech in Arabic. 19 years. He lived for 19 years. That's what I call chutzpah. Now, I wish older people like the Grand Mufti were the problem, but actually they're not. The problem is young people. Often Britain is called a nation of immigrants. They're said that we have taken in groups from all over the world very successfully over the course of thousands of years, and to some extent that's true. But in more modern history, it is truer to say that we have acquired new people from new bits of the world who shared our values or who aspired to be more like the British, the West Indian Africans, or the Indians who came from the subcontinent. All of them came to Britain sharing our values and wanting to be like the Brits. People from the subcontinent, Indians from the subcontinent, are sort of more British than the British now. They behave perfectly. They start businesses. You never see their names in the paper. They never get into trouble, never get arrested. They behave far better than the white working classes in the council estates their businesses serve. But one group has failed to integrate. One group has failed spectacularly to integrate, and that is Muslims, in particular from Pakistan. And the problem's getting worse, not better. The socially regressive attitudes of Muslims in Britain is becoming a cause of panic and alarm across the country. And it's replicated in places like Germany too, where they have imported millions of migrants from other places. And the younger generations are more radical than their parents. There's no good explanation for this other than their belief system. There is no explanation to be found in Islamophobia or any of the other various lunatic specters that the progressive left likes to claim that people like you are responsible for. You didn't do this. Their belief system did it. And it's making them worse. They're getting worse all the time. In England, 52% of Muslims believe homosexuality should be illegal, compared to 5% of the general population. I don't know who these 1 in 20 people are who think homosexuality should be illegal, but fine. But 52% of Muslims. Now, every immigrant group, except for Muslims, believes that they should come to a new country to make their lives better, to come, to integrate, and to enjoy the fruits of the new country that they have arrived at. Only Muslims, it seems to me, want to import the values they came from and turn the countries they go to into the hellholes they came from. America cannot go down this road. You cannot do it here. You cannot do it here. And you've had a really good example of why not. This summer you had an example of what will happen if you try. It's not just Europe that these statistics, by the way, that I'm reading come from. In 2015, the Center for Security Policy commissioned a poll of Muslims in America, and it found that 30% of American Muslims believe it is legitimate to use violence against people who insult Islam. It's almost 1 in 3 Muslims believe that that it is legitimate to use violence against people who crack jokes, who offend you. That is at the heart of the problem. That is at the heart of the problem. It is why the progressive left loves Islam so much, because they think the same way. They think that violence is an appropriate response to being offended. And that explains a lot of the problems. So a lot of the logical inconsistencies that you might have thought about this yourself. And think, why do these feminists who like women support and make excuses for these Muslims who treat women like crap? Well, that's the reason. Because the bigger battle for them is muddying the water between idea and action. 25% of American Muslims said that violence against Americans can be justified as part of global jihad. 51% of American Muslims want to be governed by Sharia law, in which, of course, under some circumstances, a woman's testimony is worth half that of a man's. And here's my personal favorite. 33%, 1 in 3 American Muslims, there's 1.1 million Muslims in this country, believe that if Sharia law and the Constitution clash, Sharia law should win. That's a lot of bad Skittles, to borrow an expression from Don Jr. That's a lot of bad Skittles. Islam is the only religion, the only belief system that instead of arriving in a new country and saying, when in Rome, do as the Romans do, instead arrives and says, when in Rome, claim benefits and stab people. Islam is the only religion. What? Somebody's upset by that. Something we can all agree on is the First Amendment, guaranteeing freedom of speech. It's America's most basic, most fundamental right. It is very telling to understand the opinion of Muslims in America on this topic. According to a Wenzel Strategies poll in 2012, 58% of Muslim Americans believe criticism of Islam or Muhammad is not protected free speech under the First Amendment. 45% believe those who mock Islam should face criminal charges. That would be me. 12% believe that blaspheming against Islam, 12% of American Muslims believe that blaspheming against Islam should be punishable by death. Hear a pin drop in here. But there you go. You don't only have to worry about the Muslims who commit acts of terror, like shooting up gay nightclubs. You should also be worried about the Muslims who quietly condone their actions. And these polls that I've read out to you are not cherry-picked, weird advocacy research from some batty, lunatic right-wing think tank. These figures, these numbers, are replicated in every survey that is taken in the West, no matter who does it. The numbers come out something around there. Since Islam views, so we should worry. I should say we should worry about. When are we going? Oh, yeah. I like this guy. He's quite approachable, isn't he? He's almost cute. Since Islam views God as a non-rational tyrant, the religion naturally tends to produce bloodthirsty, irrational tyranny, which is a category that nicely covers ISIS, the Taliban, and many other Islamic regimes, many of which, of course, contribute to the Clinton Foundation. That's true. It would be nice if Islam had a way to reform itself out of these problems, but the unlikelihood of that is due in large part to our next reason for disliking Islam, which is its hypocrisy. Integration in the West is one problem, but we must also consider, as our last problem, integration in the East. Muslims can't get along with anyone. It's not just us. They can't even get along with each other. Shia and Sunni Muslims tear chunks out of each other. This ideology isn't just incompatible with ours, it's even incompatible with themselves. They're constantly at odds with one another. What we witness on a regular basis is Muslims insist on special treatment in the West, whilst treating minorities in their own homelands and each other horribly. And the hypocrisy is blatant and unapologetic. The same Muslim groups who protest the ban on minarets in Switzerland in 2009 had nothing to say when asked whether it being illegal to build Christian churches in the Muslim world was acceptable. 200, and this is a sort of pettiness, this sort of triumphalist pettiness that you can see all over Europe right now, which is starting to creep into America. I've noticed it. You're a little behind us on this. One of the few things America is behind on. It started to creep in. 200 Subway sandwich stores in the UK now only serve halal meat because somebody complained in one branch. It's just these little changes. It's the little changes that people notice. They've removed all pork products now. So if you guys want to go down and have a ham sandwich, you can't. 200 Subway stores in the UK because somebody complained. Now, the Sunni Muslim Al-Azhar University cut ties with the Vatican after the Catholic Church condemned the persecution of Christians in the Muslim world. And they said that the Vatican has no business complaining about the persecution of Christians. It is, quote, interfering in Islamic affairs. Muslims in the West will decry any desecration of the Quran, but trust me, you don't want to be caught in the wrong place in the Middle East with a Bible. In war-torn Syria, Christians face unimaginable persecution at the hands of the Muslim majority. That word cry bully, have you heard that word? Cry bully, there were sort of feminists who will sort of, call people names, spit out the most appalling provocations, and then play the victim when somebody responds in kind. Trickly Puff. No, you must leave her alone. I've spoken at length why we must leave her alone. It's curious, actually. It's interesting. If we wanted to save people from this terrible region of the world, why? It's an interesting question that I have for Hillary Clinton, who's obviously paying attention enough to read out my headlines. Why? Why, Hillary? Thank you, Angel. Why, of the Syrian refugees brought to America, are only 3% Christian? Why is that? I'd quite like to know. Could be the subject of a talk by itself. The best example of how Islam treats minorities is in Indonesia, and I've written about this at length with my colleague from Breitbart, Alan Bukhari. You can look that up if you're interested. They've declared there's no room for gays in the country, in Indonesia, which is no surprise, but discrimination does not end there. Chinese Christians in Indonesia have a long history of suffering persecution, which often involves beheadings. They've gotten so used to beheadings, but it's a sort of part of everyday life now. You know, they'll talk about it almost as like going to the shops for a pint of milk. Or something. Yes, my second cousin was beheaded.